Amazing CEO exposed: how one unexpected incident grounded 200 lives and transformed a community. James Mitchell's coffee-stained tie clung to his neck like the weight of the small-town expectations that suffocated him. This morning, he wasn't just the ambitious CEO of a tech startup, he was the man tasked with navigating a catastrophe. A mechanical failure at the local airfield delayed a flight packed with 200 travelers, effectively grounding families and friends. As news raced through the town, panic unfurled amidst the calm of the Midwestern morning, the stakes growing like weeds in a neglected garden. For James, this wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a moment that could define his legacy. Having risen from the gritty backdrop of his father's auto repair shop, he knew the toll of hard work. But today, the values instilled in him clashed with his corporate reality. What would Dad think? The question echoed painfully, a haunting reminder of the man who measured worth by grit, not by the pulse of the stock market. His heart raced, and his hands trembled. A familiar surge of doubt washed over him. Choices loomed like specters, tormenting him. He thought back to his last conversation with his father, filled with disappointment, when he had chosen a high-stakes deal over community ties. He felt a shiver of shame. The incident demanded something different, a chance for redemption. As reporters swarmed the airfield, the dilemma pressed heavier on his conscience. He could harness the chaos to bolster his reputation, or he could stand and confront the moral backdrop of his ascent. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Increasingly aware of the community watching him, James felt suffocated. Ms. Collins, the local schoolteacher, approached him, her eyes a storm of grief. Her brother hadn't just been another number on that flight, he was family. Dealing with her pain tapped into something buried deep within James, exposing his emotion like raw skin. Could he help her, this person who represented the world he had drifted from? The thought terrified him while invigorating a distant hope. He scribbled ideas on a napkin, adrenaline prompting reckless thoughts. Expose the negligence of the aviation authorities. But what if doing so meant losing his fragile status? What if it further alienated a father whose approval he had chased for years? As he trembled with the enormity of his decision, a nagging fear consumed him. Would he become the hero or the fool? With the town's tension bubbling to the surface, he couldn't ignore what was at stake. Just when he thought he had reached a resolution, a biting revelation shattered his resolve. His family's legacy was tangled with the aviation authority, threading him back into childhood secrets he was desperate to escape. His heart thudded painfully in his chest. What legacy was he truly fighting for? The faces of his community loomed larger in his mind, igniting an internal chaos he could hardly bear. Standing at this precipice, he realized it wasn't just about the town anymore, it was about who he was at his core. As the weight of the moment settled around him, James Mitchell faced a question that would change everything: what man would he ultimately choose to be? The din of voices surrounded James, each whisper a reminder of the burden he now bore. Choices burdened him more than the crowded airfield could. The weight of his father's disappointed gaze seemed to filter through every interaction, mingling with the unsteadiness of his own heartbeat. He was both the architect of his ambitions and a prisoner of his past, trapped in a life he had carefully constructed yet felt increasingly alien. Facing Ms. Collins, he felt a pull to act, to rise above the executive persona he had crafted. "How can I help?" The words slipped out before he had the chance to analyze their depth. Her response was a simple nod, an unspoken agreement to seek truth together. For the first time in years, James looked not to the horizon of corporate ladders or glowing balance sheets, but to the immediate and visceral need of a community member facing the unthinkable. As the adrenaline coursed through him, he suppressed the temptation to retreat into the comfort of calculated decisions, fearful of the backlash public scrutiny could yield. Memories of his father's shop flooded him, the joy of fixing cars, the satisfaction of honest work, the pride in being part of something greater than oneself. What if exposing the negligence meant losing everything he had worked for, but saving someone from heartache? These thoughts ignited an inner conflict stronger than any he had faced in boardrooms. Would he choose the comfortable path, cloaked in prestige and the veil of success, or the arduous road of truth, which might threaten his carefully curated identity? The internal war raged violently as he began weighing the consequences of each path. James took a deep breath, channeling the same determination he once felt stepping into the auto shop as a boy, eager to learn something new each day. With resolve, he made his way towards the center of the chaotic scene, instinct guiding his steps. Each heartbeat marked the rhythm of his ascendance. Before making any statements, he needed information. He approached the mechanics, hoping to glean insights hidden beneath layers of corporate jargon and technical mumblings. They recognized him, not as a distant CEO, but as one of their own, a neighbor-turned-businessman. That bond sparked moments of frankness, and he soon found his focus sharpening. The mechanics shared snippets of concern, stories of cut corners and pushback from upper management regarding safety standards. Each revelation served as a crack in the facade he had tried to uphold. The more he learned, the more the path ahead began to crystallize. By acknowledging the safety issues, he could not only help those affected, but also stand as an agent of change, a return to the integrity instilled in him by his father. He jotted down action items frantically, feeling control seep back into his fingertips. This was not just about grief, it was the chance to confront unacceptable neglect. However, with clarity came anxiety. He sensed the storm brewing among those whom he would have to address. Would they rally behind him or rebuff the man who had remained aloof for too long? Would his father finally see him as he wished to be seen, or would his past choices define him forever? As the repercussions of his decisions loomed larger, James steadied himself to make his case. He would not shrink from the truth anymore. He needed to reshape his narrative and honor his father's lessons, not in their absence, but in their very essence. Just then, a new surge of fear fluttered within him, something far more daunting than confronting the public. What if the authorities responded with aggression rather than accountability? The path ahead was fraught with danger, and the risks were growing. With the stakes as high as they were, James looked ahead and breathed deep. The moment of truth was approaching. What lay on the other side of this pivotal decision would define him in ways he had yet to comprehend. Yet, hidden in the chaos, a shadowy figure emerged from the crowd. Encounters of the past often come knocking when we least expect them. James braced himself. He would have to face not just the authorities, but perhaps even his own father's legacy directly. Would he possess the strength to confront this new challenge? James felt a tightening in his chest as the shadow drew closer, bringing memories he'd fought to escape. The figure stepped into the light, revealing a familiar face. It was Terry, an old associate from his father's shop, now bearing marks of time and worry etched across his features. The once proud mechanic wore the worry of lingering debt and dreams deferred like a badge, and his eyes reflected a chaotic blend of emotions. James, Terry's voice was gravelly, loaded with unspoken questions. I heard about what happened. You're back in the thick of it, huh? James hesitated, the weight of responsibility juxtaposed with the comfort of a past friendship. Yeah, trying to understand everything. There are safety concerns, and, the words trailed off, uncertain of where to lead. There always are, right? Some things never change, Terry replied, almost bitterly. His gaze shifted over to the mechanics who still whispered anxiously in small groups. But you can't fix what's broken alone. They won't listen to you easily, not after how you've kept your distance. A wave of shame washed over James. Terry's words pierced through his facade, exposing the vulnerability that lay beneath his polished exterior. It was true, he'd distanced himself, chasing ambition while neglecting the roots that had first nurtured his spirit. he took a steadying breath. I need to find a way to bring this to light. I could expose the negligence, but what if it backfires? Backfires? Terry leaned in, lowering his voice. It's not just your career on the line. It's lives we're talking about. You've got a chance to be the leader you've always needed to be. But you need to decide if that's the man you want to be now. Facing Terry made every choice an ultimatum. Should he retake command of the narrative, risking everything, or retreat behind the cloak of corporate jargon and comfortable decisions? James sensed that this moment with Terry was one of the key junctions in his life, one filled with the potential for personal growth or regret. Do you think they'll see me as their ally? James questioned, a part of him longing for validation while another yearned for authenticity. They might, if you show them you care. Actions will speak louder than words, James. Terry pointed towards the gathering mechanics, then took a step back. It won't be easy, but standing alone isn't a luxury you can afford right now. You have to choose, and choose wisely. With a mind turning like gears in a well-tuned engine, James realized he was standing at the crossroads of integrity and self-preservation. The path of integrity beckoned like a siren song, urging him toward a horizon of anxiety yet filled with the hope of personal transformation. It required courage to confront the chaos, not just for himself, but for those around him, to honor his father not just in memory, but in action, an action that might ignite others to stand with him. As he steeled himself for the fight ahead, a surge of adrenaline coursed through him. The time had come to transform himself from an aloof CEO back into the man his father had nurtured, the man who stood up for what was right, even amidst chaos. He felt the stirring of a profound change within him, one that could bridge the chasm between who he was and who he could become. The weight of expectation pressed down heavily as he raised his head, locking eyes with Terry. I need to act. No more hesitations. Just as James prepared to pivot toward his future, the air shifted, crackling with uncertainty. Terry's eyes widened, not with encouragement but with alarm. James, look out. The threat's form emerged from the shadows, an imposing figure approaching with an urgent stride, one who had the power to derail everything. As recognition set in, dread filled James's gut. This confrontation could change everything in a heartbeat. Would he stand firm in his resolve, or was he about to be swept back into the dangers of his past? The stakes felt higher than ever, and it was clear that choices made in the next moment would echo through his future like a powerful engine. Roaring to life. James felt his heart race as he turned to face the figure emerging from the shadows. A familiar, imposing presence that sent a chill through him, Victor Pratt, the ruthless COO of the company. The man embodied everything James despised about corporate greed, wielding his authority like a weapon. As Victor approached, James could feel the tension in the air thicken with unspoken threats. Victor's voice was smooth, deceptively calm. I didn't expect to find you back here. I assume you've been attending to your responsibilities. James clenched his fists, the urge to respond with defiance bubbling beneath the surface. He could feel the eyes of the mechanics upon him, their expectations weighing heavily. Would they see him as a coward if he backed down? Or would they respect him more if he confronted Victor directly? I'm doing what needs to be done, James replied, striving for a steadiness he didn't feel. There are serious safety issues we need to address. Victor cut him off with a dismissive wave. Safety? Come now, James. You and I both know that attention to detail is nice in theory, but it's not practical. We have an operation to run. Our investors don't care about the minutiae. They care about profits. Profits. The word hung in the air like a bitter pill. It was a mantra he'd heard too often during board meetings, wrapped in slick presentations about efficiency and returns. James's gut twisted at the thought of lives reduced to mere numbers on a balance sheet. This wasn't just about the mechanic's safety, it was about integrity, about making choices that mattered. I care, James replied, surprising even himself with the strength of his conviction. People matter more than numbers, Victor. I won't sit idly by while the company cuts corners. Victor's smile did not reach his eyes. Is that so? You think you're in a position to make that call? You're not running an outreach program here, this is business. And in business, the risks don't always involve safety. He stepped closer, the pressure palpable. You wouldn't want to risk everything you've worked for, would you? The word struck at James's insecurities, but instead of backing down, a newfound determination surged through him. This was the moment he'd been preparing for. He couldn't allow fear or guilt to dictate his choices any longer. I'm prepared to fight for what's right, he declared, meeting Victor's gaze with unwavering resolve. If it means losing my position, so be it. I won't let this company become a graveyard for our employees' trust. Victor's expression darkened, anger flickering behind his cool facade. You're making a mistake. There are consequences for your actions, James. Don't underestimate what I can do to you. Fear threatened to creep back in, but James dismissed it. The confrontation with Victor was less about winning a battle and more about reclaiming his identity. He had pretended for too long that he could separate his personal convictions from his professional duties. The time for passive leadership was over, it was time to be the figurehead his father had raised him to be. Just then, Terry stepped closer, his presence a stabilizing force. You may have forgotten what the people you lead need, but they haven't forgotten you, James. They need a leader willing to risk it all. The truth always comes out, and when it does, the company will remember who stood by them. James could feel the shift in the atmosphere. The weight of expectation now changed, igniting a collective belief in the possibility of his courage. He turned his attention back to Victor, who was now visibly seething, but also momentarily taken aback by James's newfound defiance. This was a chess match, and every move counted. As the confrontation unfolded, inadequacies and fears within him began to dissipate. His path was clear, he needed to expose the truth, no matter the cost. Yet, as he stood poised to make his next move, he sensed that Victor was far from finished. Retribution was inevitable, and the risk of losing everything loomed larger than ever. James took a steady breath, he could feel the storm gathering around him. The next steps would either forge the man he was meant to be or condemn him to a cycle of regret. And as if to punctuate his resolve, he realized that whatever happened next would not only redefine his future, but reshape the destinies of those who depended on him. This isn't over, Victor. Not by a long shot. The tension hung thick in the air as Victor stepped back, calculating his next move. James could see the gears turning in his adversary's mind. This battle was far from won. But he also felt a tingling sense of empowerment. The momentum was shifting, and he would not let it slip away. What would Victor retaliate with next? As James stood face to face with Victor, a sense of clarity washed over him. This was not merely a confrontation, it was a definitive moment of transformation. He had tapped into a courage he didn't realize he possessed, a palpable potency that resonated in his core. His thoughts began to crystallize, aligning his fears with newfound aspirations. Victor, however, wasn't the type to back down easily. You may want to safeguard your own reputation, James, but don't forget your choices have consequences. His voice dripped with malice. James felt a jolt of anxiety. What exactly did Victor have planned? Was the threat subtle intimidation, or did Victor truly possess the power to dismantle everything James had built? He had to act. Daydreaming about change was futile, now, he needed a strategy. Taking a deep breath, James focused on his surroundings. The shop buzzed with activity, the mechanics unaware of the tension unfolding. He glanced at Terry, who was observing intently, the encouragement in his eyes reaffirming James's emerging resolve. He silently acknowledged the people depending on him. This moment was about more than just him, it was about them. What are you suggesting? James asked, forcing calm into his voice. Are you willing to risk our workers' safety for the sake of your agenda? Because if you think I'm going to stand by quietly, you're mistaken. Victor chuckled, but it lacked humor. You'll quickly learn that standing up often leads to isolation, James. Are you prepared to fight this battle alone? Because I assure you, many will choose to stay out of it. Challenge accepted. Despite the fear gnawing away at him, James could feel the embers of commitment igniting. What tools did he have at his disposal? Passion, loyalty, and a growing ear for the truth. These could rise above Victor's corporate tactics. Is that so? James replied, maintaining his gaze. If they prefer silence over integrity, then perhaps they deserve to be reminded of what true leadership looks like. I'm done being a puppet. With those words, something shifted not only in him but also in the room's atmosphere. He could sense the stirring of solidarity among the mechanics. This was a pivotal moment. James felt emboldened, grasping his role not just as an employee but as a leader who had the power to invoke change. Suddenly, clarity clicked into place. He began to strategize, mapping out his next steps. Instead of retaliating blindly against Victor's underhanded threats, he would channel this into constructive action. Gathering testimonials from the workers about safety concerns would serve as undeniable evidence. Those accounts could pave the way to a clear path forward, unearthing safety hazards while simultaneously standing as a testament to corporate negligence. Yet, as he mentally constructed this plan, a shiver ran down his spine. The stakes were much higher than he had anticipated. Realizing that truth might come at a steep price filled him with dread. Or maybe, Victor, James continued, more firmly, you're underestimating the people here. The strength of honest relationships can surpass the veneer of financial gain. Victor's face shifted, a mixture of annoyance and intrigue flashing across his features. Be careful, James. In this world, you're as good as dead without strategy. Passion doesn't pay bills. James could feel the weight of those words. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for principles. The thought ignited something within him. He had a broader vision and responsibilities that reached beyond the scenic views of corporate manipulation. Every moment was critical, and so was every decision he was to make. As Victor took a step back, his mind still calculating, James understood that moving ahead meant risking everything he had, perhaps even his job or relationships within the company. But it also positioned him as the type of leader he aspired to be, one who lived by conviction. Later that evening, as he sat at his desk, James began to plan his next move. He needed allies who shared his vision of safety and integrity. People willing to collaborate for change. As he jotted down potential names on a notepad, a sudden thought struck him: how deeply could Victor retaliate? What was the extent of his network of power? The phone rang, breaking his concentration. It was Terry, calling to discuss the brewing storm of tension. James, I have a few ideas about how we can gather support, Terry began, his tone serious. But we need to act quickly. If that's what you want, I'll do everything I can to help. James leaned back, a fresh sense of purpose thrumming through him. I'm ready, Terry. It's time to turn up the heat. Little did he know, Victor was already plotting a counterattack in response to this burgeoning risk. What else lay in store as James prepared to defy the dark forces looming over his career? The following day felt charged with an electric anticipation. James awoke early, thoughts racing as he mentally rehearsed his strategy. Gathering testimonials from his colleagues was not merely an action, it was a clarion call. He was no longer on the sidelines, he had stepped onto a battleground where principles clashed with corporate greed. As he arrived at the shop, the air thrummed with the normal bustle of gears and tools, yet he sensed an undercurrent of tension. Workers traded wary glances, whispers danced on the edges of conversations, and James recognized an opportunity. These men and women had voices, and they were poised on the precipice of a collective awakening. His first stop was the break room. As he entered, he noticed a cluster of mechanics huddled over their coffee, faces etched with concern. James took a deep breath, summoning confidence. He approached them, ready to share his vision, his voice steady against the wave of uncertainty they faced. "Hey everyone," he started, the room falling silent as the eyes turned to him. "I know things have been tense lately. I want you to know that you're not alone in this. Victor's threats don't just affect me, they affect all of us. What's at stake here is much bigger than our jobs, it's our safety." A few heads nodded, and he could see curiosity spark. James pressed on. "I'm gathering statements on safety concerns to present to upper management. I need your help. We can't let fear silence us. It's our lives. If we stand together, we can bring about real change." A heavy silence filled the room, punctuated only by the distant sounds of machinery. Then, surprisingly, a voice erupted from the back. Mark, one of the more seasoned mechanics. "It's about time someone said something. I've seen things that make my blood boil. I've kept quiet because I thought no one would listen. But if you're serious about this, James, I'm in." More voices joined, unearthing a testament of grievances. They listed safety violations like unwanted tattoos of neglect, slippery floors, worn-out machinery, insufficient safety gear. Each account added weight to his mission, transforming whispers into a rallying cry. James felt a surge of adrenaline, each shared story solidifying his resolve. But with every name that surfaced, the reality of Victor's looming threat gnawed at him. If they pushed forward, retaliation was inevitable. Yet, shielded by the commitment of his colleagues, the dread felt less suffocating. "Okay, let us meet after work," James urged, a plan forming. "We can compile everything and figure out the best way to present it." As the group dispersed, an inner turmoil surged within James. He understood that enthusiasm alone wouldn't suffice, he needed to structure their approach. Could he really lead them through this storm without losing anyone in the fallout? That afternoon, he and Terry meticulously charted the workers' testimonies. But each name scribbled down was an acknowledgement of risk, not just for James, but for everyone brave enough to join him. Victor's influence was pervasive and calculating. What if he already had a network working against them? What if they faced consequences more severe than losing their jobs? When the clock struck closing time, James felt a mixture of exhilaration and dread. They gathered in the back office, faces steely with determination yet tinged with anxiety. Ideas bounced around freely, but the weight of the task pressed down heavily. James knew this wasn't just a presentation. It was a stand against malice. When stories coalesced into a coherent narrative, the atmosphere shifted. Each worker seemed to breathe life into the convictions they shared. "We're not just fighting for ourselves," someone reminded. "We're fighting for what's right." But just as hope flourished, the door creaked open. Victor's silhouette loomed in the doorway, eyes sharp and assessing. "What's happening here?" he asked, voice deceptively casual, yet pulsing with malice. In that moment, time froze. James's heart raced, a maelstrom of fear and determination churning within. He felt the stakes elevate to a new height. This was a showdown, one that would either solidify his path as a leader or unravel it entirely. What would Victor's next move reveal? And how far was James willing to go to ensure the truth came to life? With Victor's presence hanging ominously in the air, the gravity of the situation crashed down upon James. Faces shifted from determination to uncertainty, the rallying spirit doused by fear. He could feel the unspoken question threading through the room: would they pay for this rebellion? "Just discussing some safety protocols, Victor," James replied, forcing a calmness he didn't feel. The man's piercing gaze could slice through any pretense, and James knew he had to hold his ground. He sensed the collective tension inside the group, everyone was waiting for his lead. Victor raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a knowing smirk. "Safety protocols, huh? You mean, safety violations? Looks like people are starting to run their mouths." His tone dripped with threats, an unambiguous warning that sent chills down James's spine. But a flicker of resolve ignited within him. He couldn't back down now. What matters is ensuring that everyone's voice is heard. Victor, James shot back, a spark of defiance in his voice. This isn't just about keeping our jobs. It's about keeping each other safe. With that, the tension shifted slightly. Mark, emboldened by James's words, interjected, "Yeah. We're tired of the risks we take every day. This isn't just about the company bottom line." At first, the confrontation seemed to inflame Victor even further. He stepped forward, towering over them, his shadow bulky across the room. "You think you're the first to challenge me?" His tone snapped like a whip. "You're out of your depth, James. You've no idea what I can do to you. To all of you." James clenched his fists, the heat of anger mingling with the cold dread pooling in his stomach. Every instinct told him to cower, but he resisted. Fear had thrived for too long. "You can threaten us, but it won't stop the truth from coming out." Victor's sneer tightened. "Truth is what you want? Then let us see what happens when you dial management. I can assure you, it won't go the way you think." Realizing the stakes, James's instincts screamed at him to retreat, to remain quiet and blend into the backdrop. But a stronger part of him, the part that had spent sleepless nights pondering how far he was willing to go, implored him to stand firm. "Whatever you think you can do," he said, holding Victor's gaze, "it won't erase our stories. Every time you try to silence one of us, more will rise." Victor's eyes narrowed, the confrontation hanging thick like fog. James felt the weight of the words settle in the room. For the first time, they had banded together not just under threats, but in defiance of them. The interaction propelled James into an unexpected self-reflection. His voice had become a weapon, slicing through the oppressive atmosphere, but he wondered how far it could carry him. What if Victor countered with devastating repercussions? Who could he trust, and where would this lead them all? As Victor pivoted on his heel, the door swinging closed with a loud thud, the air began to clear. Despite the initial fear, a resolute spirit began to bubble within the room. They shared glances, a flicker of courage igniting among them. "Tonight," James declared, determination surging, "we need to prepare ourselves. We have to document everything thoroughly and craft our approach carefully. If we're going to do this, we need to be united and ready for whatever comes our way." Each head nodded with newfound resolve. They all felt the rush of solidarity, but beneath it, the fear of retaliation loomed large like a thunderstorm on the horizon that could erupt at any moment. As the meeting disbanded, James lingered, grappling with his thoughts. Victor's chilling warning echoed in his mind, an increased urgency to fortify his leadership. Was he prepared for what lay ahead? The risk of failure grounded him, igniting a fierce determination to uncover Victor's hidden agendas. How could he leverage the collected testimonies not just for immediate change, but as a strategy to dismantle Victor's manipulations? The layers of deception ran deep within the company, deeper than he dared to imagine. As James locked up the office that night, he felt the electric charge of his mission build, an urgency pulsating with each heartbeat. This fight had just begun, and he was ready to uncover more than just the surface. Yet little did he know, Victor had already started to plan his retribution. Would James's resolve withstand the coming storm? And could he navigate the treacherous waters that lay ahead while illuminating the shadows of corporate malice? The air hummed with a blend of adrenaline and anxiety as James paced around his small office, piecing together the fragments of his strategy. Ruminating over Victor's threats, he felt the weight of responsibility settle heavier on his shoulders. The stakes had exploded, morphing from a personal concern into a collective struggle for safety and integrity. For the first time, he wasn't just advocating for himself but for the entire team's welfare. He stopped, running a hand through his hair, feeling raw fear edge closer to panic. How could he sail through this turbulent sea? The memories of his earlier self, timid and eager to please, seemed distant now. He had forgotten how far he had come from simply taking orders to confronting power head-on. But this meant risking everything. James opened his laptop, the bright light illuminating his furrowed brow as he carefully organized the testimonies collected from his colleagues. Each story whispering the potential truth. He meticulously sorted their notes into categories: negligence, safety violations, and the growing list of injuries that had gone unreported. The task felt monumental, yet invigorating, like chiseling away at an ice block to reveal a hidden sculpture. Hours passed, and the world outside faded, but the whirring of thoughts echoed inside his head. He hadn't noticed the shadows creeping across his desk until a knock jolted him back. It was Mara, her expression filled with a cocktail of concern and determination. "James," she said, stepping into the warmth of the room. "I've been thinking about our conversation from earlier. We need to decide how we're going to confront Victor without leaving ourselves too exposed." Mara's presence ignited James' motivation. He was reminded of why he couldn't falter. "I've compiled everything," he said, gesturing to the screen. "The testimonies are stark. If management sees the extent of Victor's negligence, we can leverage that." Her gaze flickered over the screen, hesitant but intrigued. "It's a good start, but what if Victor gets wind of this? He'll do everything in his power to silence us. We must have a fail-safe plan." The implication of Victor's reach sent another jolt of unease through him. Fail-safe plan? Like what? "I can't get too sensitive or elusive. We face him head-on." Mara shook her head. "That's brave, but we need to be strategic. Emotional confrontations rarely pay off in an abusive power structure. What if we build an anonymous whistleblower process first? It allows people to share their experiences without fear of reprisal." The idea took root in James's mind, mingling hope with caution. He'd never considered that route. It struck him that this was a hidden reservoir of strength he hadn't trusted before, the power of anonymity. Yes. If we can get everyone to speak up safely, it would be a tidal wave of information. "Let us draft a plan," she said with that infectious confidence that had been their secret ally. As they collaborated, the intensity in the room escalated from anxiety to laser-focused determination. Each word exchanged became a pact, each detail discussed was a brick laid in a wall against Victor's onslaught. James marveled at how quickly he had grown as a leader, discovering resilience in every decision they made together. The digital clock ticked past midnight, and though their bodies felt weary, their spirits soared. Yet as he clicked to save the document one final time and glanced out at the dimly lit parking lot, a sudden thought gripped him: what would Victor do next? Outside forces loomed larger than mere incompetence, and James couldn't shake the premonition that Victor had already set his plan into motion. Was he truly ready for the ramifications of their actions? With their plan in motion and Victor still looming, James felt a pulse of urgency urging him onward. He could almost hear the clock ticking down. The confrontation was inevitable. He would no longer back down. The veil of intimidation was lifting, giving way to a potential reckoning. As he locked the computer with a sense of accomplishment, his resolve tightened. The moment was upon him, and he was set to be the agent of change. But would he see it through when Victor finally retaliated? In the dark of the office, the whisper of impending conflict festered, leaving James wondering, would he rise to the occasion, or would Victor's shadow swallow the strength he had begun to foster? James awoke to the raw chill of dawn, a beam of sunlight breaking through the curtains as if spotlighting his inner turmoil. The weight of yesterday's decisions pressed down on him like a thick fog, obscuring any fleeting sense of triumph he might have felt. The plan with Mara had been a catalyst, but the reality was now too potent to ignore. The confrontation with Victor was not just a battle of wills, it was a test of character. As he brewed his morning coffee, the familiar scent did little to soothe his racing thoughts. He stood still for a moment, watching the swirling steam rise and dissipate, mirroring the uncertainty swirling in his mind. Could he bear the consequences of challenging Victor? The question lingered like an unwelcome guest. He grabbed a pen and felt the cool surface of the notepad beneath his fingers, stifling the tremor in his hand. Each stroke on the page represented an affirmation of his resolve. "Today, I act," he murmured to himself, sealing the promise into his own universe of ambition. Arriving at work, the atmosphere buzzed with an undercurrent of tension. Colleagues traded nervous glances, whispers sprinkled with apprehension. James felt the energy shifting. He was no longer just a participant in their whispered fears. He was becoming a leader, sculpting a plan to confront those fears, transforming collective anxiety into action. The transformation inside him seemed to ripple through the office, and with each step he took, James found himself growing bolder. He gathered everyone in the conference room, their expressions revealing a mix of hope and fear. "We have a plan," he announced, injecting confidence into the air. Mara stood beside him, her presence reassuring. "We're starting an anonymous whistleblower process. Everyone's voice matters, and together we'll ensure that our concerns can no longer be ignored." Murmurs of uncertainty fluttered through the group. A few worried faces clustered at the back. "What if Victor finds out?" one person asked, their voice trembling slightly. James took a deep breath, keenly aware that this was where a true leader needed to emerge. "Victor's scrutiny may be fierce, but our anonymity will protect us. This process is our shield. It allows everyone here to act not just for themselves, but for a safer work environment. We deserve to speak up without fear." With each word, James felt the energy in the room resonate with a newfound vigor. The power dynamics within the group began to shift as he watched hesitant faces transform into expressions of determination. But beneath the surface, another part of him knew that Victor was not one to be easily intimidated. After the meeting, Mara approached him, a hint of concern shadowing her features. "James, your words were powerful, but are you ready for the backlash? Victor is not going to idle by and let this happen." Her honesty cut through his burgeoning confidence, reminding him of the real stakes. "I have to be ready, Mara. For them and for myself," he replied, feeling a swell of determination. At that moment, he understood that this was not merely about confronting Victor. It was about reclaiming his identity and redefining his own limits. Days turned into a frenetic blur as they rolled out the whistleblower process, gathering testimonies while simultaneously preparing for Victor's inevitable backlash. Each submission invigorated him, but with each new account came the weight of stories, too long silenced stories that mirrored his own anxious journey. As he compiled and organized their revelations, he stumbled across a mention of past violations that had fallen through the cracks, aligning alarmingly with his own experiences. It suddenly dawned on him, his journey was not just a personal battle but a shared one. He had never realized the extent of Victor's grip on their lives until now. His resolve solidified further. But as he reflected on the collective strength blooming around him, a nagging dread slithered into his mind. What would he do when the repercussions fully uncoiled? Would he become the leader he promised to be? Under the heavy weight of Victor's impending wrath? The tension building felt nearly suffocating, and the edge of anticipation sharpened with each tick of the clock. As he continued working, a throbbing tremor ran through him, urging him forward. Change was a beast to confront, but James was no longer the timid soul willing to merely survive. The time had come for action. A confrontation loomed just beyond the horizon, and he could feel the urgency tightening around him. Would he ultimately summon the courage when the moment of reckoning arrived, or would the forces of his past drag him back into despair? The clock struck 6 as James Mitchell entered the conference room, determination etched across his face. The air was thick with anticipation, colleagues waiting with bated breath for the revelation of his plan. He glanced around the room, meeting the eyes of the men and women he was about to empower, the mechanics, workers, and admin staff who had whispered their fears into the ether for far too long. Today, they would be catalysts for change. "Thank you for gathering," he began, feeling the weight of their collective dreams resting on his shoulders. "Today marks the beginning of a new chapter. We will not sit back in silence any longer while concerns about safety go unheard. Murmurs of encouragement rippled through the crowd. These individuals were tired of fear, they wanted to be heard. We collected testimonials anonymously regarding safety violations, and gathered enough evidence to confront Victor and the board collectively, he said, his voice gaining strength with each word. We will push for change, not just for ourselves but for everyone affected by his negligence. A sense of empowerment surged through the group. It seemed infectious, fear began to morph into resolve, their collective spirit galvanized by James's commitment. One voice rose above the rest, "What's our plan?" James smiled, drawing strength from their camaraderie. "Our first step is to reach out to the board with these testimonies. We'll present a united front and demand transparency and accountability." As he laid out his strategy, he noticed faces brightening, no longer shadows of hesitation but reflections of steadfast resolve. They discussed tactics, how to approach the board, the items they would present, and the questions they would pose. James was taken aback by the transformation budding among his colleagues. The quiet, unsure mechanics had become vocal advocates willing to embrace the risk. "Remember," he cautioned, tapping the conference table with conviction, "this is about integrity. We may face repercussions, but we are stronger together. We fight for more than just our jobs, we are fighting for principles." After several hours of heated discussion, they finalized the details. Each department had specific responsibilities, and together they would present a comprehensive case. James felt a rush of pride swelling within him, recognition of the growth that had transformed not only him but the entire team. As the meeting adjourned, he caught a glimpse of Mara smiling, her expression radiating approval. "You've really come into your own, James," she said softly. "I never thought I'd see this kind of change. You're leading us into the future." "Thank you, Mara," he replied, feeling a surge of appreciation. "I couldn't have done this without your support. It's about the team, and together we've only just scratched the surface." But deep down, James was aware that they weren't out of the woods yet. Victor was still a looming presence, the anticipation of his reaction was palpable. The following days were marked by a flurry of activity as James guided his team through preparations. He felt the pendulum of tension swinging, not just rising and falling with each day but propelling him forward with relentless momentum. They were on the brink of something monumental, and that adrenaline was stirring in every interaction. The moment of confrontation finally arrived. As they filed into the boardroom, gathering support from their allies, the atmosphere filled with electricity. This was a pivotal juncture, a point in their lives where they would either shatter Victor's grip on the company or submit to his intimidation. The board members, a mix of stoic faces, awaited them, reflecting the dispassionate corporate structure James had grown weary of. His heart raced as he stepped forward, ready to present their findings. "We come here today not out of anger but out of necessity," he declared, his voice steady. "Our goal is simple: safety and accountability, imperatives that should resonate throughout this organization." With every detail James unveiled, a sense of liberation washed over him. The testimonies rang out like clear bell chimes, illuminating the complacency that had bred negligence. Colleagues chimed in, sharing their stories and frustrations, painting a vivid picture of the workplace environment they wanted to foster. The board listened with furrowed brows, some shifting uneasily in their seats. But James was undeterred by any momentary flicker of resistance. He was now a man of purpose, a phoenix risen from the ashes of his past insecurities, determined to advocate for those once silenced. Just as the confrontation reached a crescendo of clarity, Victor entered the room. His presence felt burdensome, an amalgamation of disdain and fury. "What is this?" he interjected, voice laced with barely concealed hostility. "Who gave you the authority to question my leadership?" This was the moment James had been both preparing for and dreading. "We have the right to question practices that threaten the safety and well-being of our colleagues," James stated firmly. "Your leadership cannot stem from fear and suppression." The air crackled with tension, the power dynamics shifting beneath unwelcome scrutiny. Victor's dismissive smirk faded into a scowl, exposed by the bravery James had induced in those around him. "You're stepping far out of your lane," Victor spat. "Do you have any idea what repercussions this will bring?" James felt a rush of defiance. The fear that had anchored him for years dissipated into a collective resolve from the group. "Yes, I understand there may be consequences, but every single one of us stands behind this," he asserted, lifting his chin in defiance. "We stand together," echoed Mara, her voice like a rallying cry. As the confrontation raged, something shifted within James. He realized that he had transformed. No longer shackled by self-doubt, he had found his voice, not only for himself but for those who had been forced into silence. His journey had come full circle from the uncertain boy in his father's auto shop to a decisive leader in the face of adversity. Days later, as the board huddled in an emergency session, James stood outside, the weight of uncertainty still palpable, but balanced by the exhilaration of their actions. Their collective tickets to freedom had been punched. He had proven his resolve to both himself and the community that had once felt neglected. Ultimately, the outcome was more than professional success. James had proven to himself that he could face fears head-on. He realized being a leader meant being true to one's values, to inspire others, and not merely to climb the corporate ladder. He had become a bastion of integrity, the man he had always aspired to be. As he walked away from the boardroom, his path was illuminated by the confidence blooming within him. He embraced the uncertainty of the future, knowing he would face it with an unyielding vulnerability, a seasoned warrior shaped by courage. Now was the time to share his story and inspire others who felt small against sweeping tides of corporate malice. His resolve was stronger, and so was his heart, ready to take on any challenges that lay ahead. Don't wait another moment. You have to subscribe now to the channel so you don't miss out on exclusive emotional stories like this. Leave a like to fuel the algorithm, and share in the comments your reactions and theories about this conclusion. You need to voice your thoughts. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this powerful ending. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions. Your engagement makes a difference.